Welcome to Ngozi Technology YouTube channel, your go-to destination on matters academic research writing. I am Lucy Wanjiro, your research assistant. In this channel, we are dedicated to take you through a step-by-step basic guideline in writing a research paper from the topic to its conclusion. Whether you're pursuing a diploma, undergraduate, postgraduate diploma, master's, or PhD degree, this channel is tailor-made for you. We are committed to equip you to become an authentic and skilled research writer. Remember to subscribe, like, share, and engage us in the comment section for questions and suggestions. Welcome on board. Today we're going to be discussing about formulating a research hypothesis. What is a research hypothesis? A research hypothesis is a precise and testable prediction that proposes a relationship between variables in a study. You see, it is a testable prediction that is proposing a relationship between one variable and the other in the study. It is a guiding statement that also outlines the expected outcomes or effects on existing knowledge. So it gives expected outcomes and the effects based on existing knowledge. Remember, your hypothesis statement must be testable. Okay, so key things to consider when formulating a research hypothesis. Number one, ensure your hypothesis is informed by a thorough literature review. You must do a thorough literature review. You must understand the existing research gaps that you have identified in your topic. The unanswered questions. You must be aware of that literature. You have to go back to your literature and study and identify those gaps, those unanswered questions. That is where you formulate a hypothesis from. Number two, clarity and testability. Your hypothesis must be testable. It must be clear. The researcher formulates a clear and testable hypothesis. For example, increased daily social media usage among adolescents is positively correlated with higher levels of anxiety. Here, the independent variable is social media usage, and the dependent variable is anxiety levels. You get it? The hypothesis is that there is a positive correlation between usage of social media and higher levels of anxiety. It is predicting a positive correlation between the two. Number three, your hypothesis has to be relevant. Consider the broad context and relevance of your hypothesis. Assess its potential contribution to the field and its significance in addressing the research question. A meaningful hypothesis not only adds to academic discourse, but also has practical implications or applications, increasing the overall impact of your research. It is not only going to add to the academic discourse, but after you have written that hypothesis, it is going to increase the overall impact of your research in terms of its implications and applications. Okay? So when does your research paper require a hypothesis? Did you know that not all research papers require a hypothesis? Yes, I want to inform you that there are times that your research requires a hypothesis, and there are times when your research does not require a hypothesis. So let's look at when does your research paper require a hypothesis. Number one, when you're doing an experimental study. What is an experimental study? This is where researchers manipulate an independent variable to observe its effect on the dependent variable. Okay? In that state, a hypothesis is very, very crucial because it predicts the expected relationship or outcome that guides the design and analysis of the experiment. Number two, when you're doing quantitative research. What is quantitative research? These are studies that employ quantitative methods such as surveys and quantitative analysis. They must have a hypothesis. Researchers formulate hypotheses to make predictions about relationship between variables and then use data analysis to test and confirm or refute these predictions. Another time when you need a hypothesis is when you're doing cause and effect investigations. These are types of research papers that require a hypothesis, cause and effect investigation. When the research aims to establish a cause and effect relationship between variables, a hypothesis is very, very essential. It articulates the expected direction and nature of this relationship. That's how it guides the research process. Then when you're doing a comparative study, when you're comparing groups or conditions, you must have a hypothesis. For example, when your study is comparing the effectiveness of two teaching methods, you might formulate a hypothesis predicting a difference in academic performance between the two groups. Okay? Then when you're doing a scientific inquiry, hypotheses are integral to the scientific method. They provide a framework for systematically testing ideas, contributing to the accumulation of knowledge and the advancement of scientific understanding. So when you're doing a scientific inquiry, you need a hypothesis. So when is the hypothesis unnecessary in a research paper? I have said again that not all research papers require the use of a research hypothesis. The need of a research hypothesis depends on the nature of the research paper and the research design. So these are scenarios when you do not need a research hypothesis. When you're doing an exploratory research is also called a qualitative research. Remember, the previous one was a quantitative. So this one we are talking about qualitative, yani quality. The aim of this research is to explore or understand a phenomena. So instead of testing hypotheses, in this scenario, you have open-ended research questions to guide the investigation. So in this qualitative research, you do not use hypotheses, you use open-ended research questions. So the other scenario is when you're doing a descriptive research. This research aims to describe a situation or a phenomena, and it may not necessarily predict relationships between variables. So you may not focus on testing hypotheses. There will be no use of a hypothesis in this scenario. Another type of research is applied or practical studies. Practical or applied research, especially in the field of program evaluation, policy analysis, may prioritize practical outcomes over hypothesis testing. The emphasis might be on assessing the effectiveness of an intervention, making evidence-based recommendations, not hypothesis testing. And when again you're doing a theoretical paper, a theoretical paper may not involve empirical data collection or hypothesis testing. Instead, they focus on developing or refining theories, discussing concepts, or synthesizing existing literature. So in this case, you do not need a research hypothesis. Okay. So what are the steps to formulate this research hypothesis. What are the steps of formulating this research hypothesis? Number one, you identify the variables in your topic, in your study, in your research problem. Analyze the research problem thoroughly and identify key variables involved. For example, if your research problem is about the impact of sleep on academic performance, your variables could be amount of sleep and academic performance. Those are the variables. Then determine the nature of the relationship. Now, we say that hypothesis is about predicting relationship between variables. So consider the nature of the relationship between your variables. Is it an associative relationship, suggesting a correlation, or a causal relationship, indicating that changes in one variable cause changes in another? Consider the nature of the relationship between your variables. Is it an associative relationship that suggests a correlation, or a causal relationship that indicates that changes in one variable causes changes in another variable? This distinction will guide the form of your hypothesis. Okay, the third step is you develop a directional hypothesis statement. So if you're expecting a specific direction of change in your variables, craft a directional hypothesis. For example, an increase in the amount of sleep is associated with an improvement in academic performance. So you have predicted the direction of change in your variables, because you are saying an increase in the amount of sleep is associated with an improvement in academic performance. So the next thing, after you have developed a directional hypothesis statement, formulate a non-directional hypothesis. You might not have a specific direction in mind. In that case, you can formulate a non-directional hypothesis using our example. This could be, there is a significant relationship between hours of sleep and academic performance. You may not know the direction, so you can use the term significant relationship. Okay? Make your hypothesis testable. Ensure that your hypothesis can be tested using your research design. Yes. Use a research design that can allow you to collect data and analyze it to support or reject your hypothesis. Avoid vague statements or ideas that cannot be measured. Okay? Yeah. Those are the steps. You have now your hypothesis. So examples of a research hypothesis, you can use a statement like increased exposure to natural light will be positively correlated with improved mood among office workers, or higher levels of physical activity among elementary school students will be associated with enhanced academic performance in mathematics and language. Those are just examples. There is a positive correlation between social media usage and perceptions of social isolation among adolescents. These are examples of research hypotheses. Since that's just an example of how a hypothesis could look like. As we conclude, these are the key takeaways. Number one, your research hypothesis should be clear and specific. A well-crafted hypothesis is clear in its formation. It clearly defines the variables involved and the expected relationships between them. Avoid vague and general statements. Number two, make sure your hypothesis is testable and falsifiable. What does this mean? A good hypothesis should be testable, meaning it can be empirically investigated through observation or experimentation. And it should be falsifiable, meaning there is a possibility to prove it wrong. This ensures that the hypothesis is suitable for a scientific inquiry. Number three, make sure that your research hypothesis is grounded on theory and literature. It should be informed by existing theories and supported by relevant literature. At least let it demonstrate that you understand the current state of knowledge in that field that you are studying, and that it is going to contribute, and it's going to contribute to the existing body of research. Last but not least, relevance and significance. A well-crafted hypothesis has to address a meaningful research question. It has to be relevant. It has to be significant to that field of study, okay? So consider the potential impact and the contribution of the hypothesis to the broader understanding of the subject matter, right? All right. Now we have come to the end of our study, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that ultimately, the decision to include a research hypothesis depends on the nature of the research, the goals of the study, and the chosen research design and methodology. Okay? Thank you so much for joining our academic research journey today. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more insightful content. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, like, and share. Until next time, happy researching. I am Lucy Wanjiro, your research assistant. Adios.